Flipping was actually an accident for me. So I was all in on the BRRRR strategy. I had a partner who was full-time real estate. So it was really bizarre because I remember listening to all these Bigger Pockets podcasts. I ended up getting invited to be on it. And then I got invited to this first Maui mastermind group with, all these amazing people. Surreal feeling. So the whole reason that I got into real estate in the first place was lifestyle related. It was to create freedom, and I created this monster that was way worse than my W-2 job ever was. Our biggest contractor, he completely started to fail to the point where we had 30 plus projects that were almost a year and not done. And we were having to give him money and more money to try to get things across. And eventually he just walked off all of the jobs. There's always going to be bad stuff. So you just have to learn to live with the bad stuff, how to make the best of it. How you guys doing?
Great.
So my name is Ian Reeves. I'm a local investor here in Kansas City. I've lived here since, 2012-ish. This title here was a little bit of a joke, but I actually did finish it 2 hours ago, so that's not that much of a joke. So this is my story. So I'm from Washington State. I went to school for mechanical engineering, got a job right out of college at Kiewit, here local in Kansas City. I moved all over the country for 10 years building power plants. Kind of got tired of moving around, so they basically dictated where I was going, and that started to be not fun, so I took a job back in the office, and then I started getting pigeonholed in my career. Went through divorce. I call it my early midlife crisis. Just wasn't super happy, and I started kind of looking for something different. I questioned my path, so these are back in the power plant days, so yeah, huge projects. It was actually really fun and exciting. And honestly, I'm really grateful for that because a lot of the stuff that I use now in my real estate business, I actually learned how to manage people, subcontractors, estimating processes, spreadsheets. I was really good at spreadsheets. So a lot of stuff that I use in my business today, I actually learned from that job. So I am very grateful. It was a lot of work, long hours, and it was really the moving around that started to get pretty hard. But anyway, the journey really began for me with reading. First, it was just a bunch of self-development type books, and it was mindset type books. I started noticing that every book that I was reading, I was absorbing all this information from people, and my mindset started to shift a little bit. And I realized that, extraordinary. I sort of had this belief before that, to do things that other people would think as, that's for not me. But I realized, well, these are just normal people who have done the work to become extraordinary, and I started figuring out that, I could be one of them if I learned the right skills and having some traits and all that. And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad. How many people in this room have read that book? Pretty much everybody. So I read that book, and it's just light bulb moment. Everything made sense. Found Bigger Pockets. I pretty much just got obsessed. I would literally wake up in the morning, I'd be listening to the podcast, and I would be walking to the door of my work, listening the whole way, and I'd shut off right when I got to the door. So I think I listened to 300 episodes in a very short period of time. So, has everybody read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck? Yeah, a few of you. So I thought this was really, really interesting. It just talks about the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset, and I think I was probably more fixed, and then as I started to read and learn some of this stuff, my mindset started to become a little bit more growth-minded, I guess. Great book. If you have not read it, I highly recommend. Especially if you're a parent, it teaches you a lot about, how to, facilitate a growth mindset in your children. I started out guns blazing in 2015, bought a duplex, I house hacked. That was my first deal. I think that's probably a lot of people's first deal. Worked really well. So I used up all my money on the duplex at the time. Second deal, I did a sub 2. I was all over the place, and I was just trying to figure out any way that I could do as many deals as possible. I got a partner. I started doing the BRRRR strategy. I actually had multiple partners. Flipping was actually an accident for me. So I was all in on the BRRRR strategy. I had a partner who was full-time real estate. I was still working the engineering job, and he was basically out managing the rehabs, and I was working my job and trying to do real estate while I should have been working. And then eventually, obviously, from the BRRRR strategy it's very hard to do a perfect BRRRR, and right now I'd argue it's pretty much impossible to do a perfect BRRRR. And you end up with some amount of money left in the deal, and then you start running out of money. Mm-hmm. We got to the point where we'd done multiple BRRRRs, and the bank account was getting pretty low. We were like, well, if we sold this, it looks like we could probably make 20 grand. Let's try that. Sold and made 20 grand. Like, if we did a couple of these a month and a couple of these a month, we could grow a lot faster. And that was kind of the light bulb moment. So that was what got me into flipping. I also realized that to get financial freedom from rentals was going to take a very long time, but flipping, I could flip a deal or two a month, and I could replace my income a heck of a lot faster. So I started working on building the flipping business. Started scaling, started doing multiple flips a month. We built all the processes and systems. I basically took all my spreadsheets from my previous job and figured out how to, build processes for flipping. I raised a lot of money. One of our contractors at the time, he wanted to grow his business, and we helped him grow his business alongside us. He started out with, it was like him and 6 guys, and at the peak, he was up, I think he had 12 crews and 50 or 60 guys working for him, which ended up backfiring, which we'll talk about. But we were successfully flipping multiple properties a month. I was feeling pretty good. Life was good. So these are kind of some of our earlier flips. You probably see our houses around gray with a yellow door, so they all looked very similar. We sort of had, just standards, and every house looked the same. We did the same thing on every house. It was a great formula. Did get a little bit boring after a while, but it worked, and we were making money. Early success. So it was really bizarre because I remember, listening to all these Bigger Pockets podcasts. I ended up getting invited to be on it, and then I got invited to this. It was like the first Maui mastermind group with, all these amazing people. Surreal feeling to be in a room with all these people, but somehow I weaseled my way to becoming I'm friends with Brent Turner. I've got his cell phone, can't give it to you. And a ton of other people here. So anyway, Investor Girl Bridge, she's got really famous now. I got to be in one of their Bigger Pockets real estate books, and then I joined this mastermind group called GoBundance, which is basically you have to have $1 million net worth to be in it, and just really high-level business mastermind group. It was very awesome, and that's me and my wife in Peru, and got a little taste of the good life. It was pretty cool. So we got a little bit of success. Let's try to get some more. So we go from we're doing about 5 deals a month at this time. Sit down with my partner, sit down with our contractors, like, let's try to do 10. So we started ramping up over time. We took all of our existing contractors and sat down with them and said, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Do you think you guys can ramp up? I hired our first full-time project manager. That's really when things started to go downhill a little bit, which we'll talk about later. We also, some changes that we made was we loosened up our buying criteria, and we moved into some new areas. So just to be able to do that volume of deals a month, you had to be a little bit looser on what you're buying. We doubled down on our marketing. So, not only are we flipping all these houses, but we've got our own internal marketing system, and then we're aggressively going after deals, and we did it. We got to where we were doing 10 a month for several months. I mean, basically a whole year. Has anybody seen this before? So there's this thing where I think wisdom only comes with getting kicked in the nuts a few times. So, I was on a high. I'd seen nothing but success. I hadn't had enough difficult things to teach me lessons yet. I was not yet wise. So I was at the peak of not stupid, as I like to say. And it was shortly after this that things started kind of go downhill a little bit. And the bottom there, so that's where you either crash and burn, or you learn those tough lessons and then you actually become wise. So first sign of trouble was early 2021. The first thing that started happening was the rehab started taking longer. So you're typically able to get them done in 4 to 6, 8 weeks for a bigger one, and that started to change. And now rehabs were taking 10 weeks, 12 weeks, or even longer. We saw that the quality in our projects was starting to go down. So we were having more negative feedback on our listings, and just a lot more screw-ups. There were budget overruns. We were missing stuff. It felt like we were starting to lose control of our projects a little bit. I should probably mention this. So at this time I had a business partner. My role was the buying and basically managing the business, the funding, basically everything except for actually managing the projects. My business partner's job at this time was managing the projects. Each month, we'd sit down and I'd talk to my partner. Hey, it seems like we're kind of getting a little bit farther behind here. Do I need to, pump the brakes a little bit on buying? No, we're going to catch up. It'll be okay. Should listen to my gut. And we were buying houses faster than we were getting them released and sold. And then 2021, the big thing happened, which was COVID, right? Perfect storm of bad stuff. So our biggest contractor, this is the guy that had 13 crews at the peak, he completely started to fail to the point where we had 30 plus projects that were almost a year and not done. And we were having to give him money and more money to try to get things across. And eventually he just walked off all of the jobs without them being done. And the problem was the timing could not have been worse. If you guys remember, during that COVID time, material prices just escalated really rapidly. And so from the time, now keep in mind, some of these projects were at a year. We were a year in, or almost a year. By the time that we rebid them and got new contractors with the new pricing to get them done, we're underwater on all of them. So it was a mess. Other problems, the projects in new areas like the urban core, we weren't getting timely feedback. Part of it was the rehab quality that we were having trouble selling them. But we weren't getting timely feedback on the new areas, so by the time that we got the feedback, we'd already bought several. We had lots of rehab scope busts. We just weren't getting projects done in a reasonable time frame. He wasn't our only contractor. We had other contractors, but across the board, just totally lost control of the business. Permits and city inspections, when you have that many projects going on, try to coordinate that. That became a real problem, lots of problems there. too much energy spent trying to get our existing contractors up to speed and over the hump when we should have been going out and finding new contractors and spreading the workload out. And then negative cash flow. We had all these projects on short-term financing, holding costs, things were totally out of control. So this is me. So end of 2021, this is when, I was like, okay, we got to take evasive action. I went out and hired a guy that I used to work at Kiewit. Someone knows him. His name was Bo. Amazing guy, really good manager. And he came on board and he said, man, what do you need from me? First thing I need is contractors. So we came up with this plan. Like I was calling all the Home Depot pro desks. I offered incentives. I said, like, for example, I went in there and said, if you will give me a contractor that does 5 projects successfully, I will give you $2,000. So any guy at a pro desk is happy to do that, but it's well worth it to us, right? All sorts of incentive programs, and in a matter of months, we had, I think, 6 or 7 brand new contractors, like good contractors, working with us, and we're working on getting them all loaded. We cut out our marketing completely, so we did everything that we could to drop our overheads. That was $20,000 off the bottom line there, gone. Took our existing contractors, and we redistributed the workload so that nobody had too much. We readjusted our buying criteria. We got stricter again, cut out the problem zip codes, and tried to only buy in areas that were going to sell fast, though it is a market. And then the other thing was we kind of adjusted the cookie cutter approach. Every house, what's the highest and best use for this house? Before it was basically full rehab on every house, but sometimes we'd wholesale it, sometimes we just do light rehab. That's what we were doing. Beginning of 2022, that's when I left my partner, started my own business. It was basically the same team, but they just came over and worked for me. Much lower overhead, things were starting to go okay. The struggle was, I say it was like trying to build a parachute after we'd already jumped, because we got this huge mess of projects. I got a brand new project manager, brand new contractors. Keep in mind, it took us years to get our old guy up to where he was up to speed. So we're trying to, in a matter of months, get a whole new team up to speed on the expectations and all that. What happened in 2022? Interest rates. So I'm already in a really precarious spot. And we're just starting to get to a point where we're recovering, and it was like, wham, nothing was moving. I've got a $4 million line of credit with $40,000 a month in interest. Got all this overhead. It was pretty brutal. This is an example of one that, when I say rehab quality was poor, this is an example. This is one that I actually went back in and fixed up. But like this, yeah, it's been rehab, but this was supposed to be a $300,000 house. And obviously that does not look like a $300,000 house. And then this kind of stuff drove me absolutely crazy. So we've got 3 different textures of wood. Nothing matches. You got whites and grays and browns. This is one that I went back in and, it didn't take a lot. We just painted the front door, added some shutters, we painted the cabinets, did a few things. So I had several projects that I had to go back and do this kind of thing on. Worst 6 months of my life. So I've literally just been grinding really, really hard for 2 years, and things were just falling apart on me. I literally started having health issues, got asthma really bad, ended up in the hospital, got depressed, had panic attacks, all the things. I was basically just white knuckling and trying to get through every day, and it was really rough. I ended up selling almost half of my rentals, basically to try to make up the shortfall. So worth mentioning, but my partner at the time, he only had a handful of rentals without a lot of equity. I had 120 units at the time. Long story short, all the financial responsibility fell onto me. That was very rough. 2023, that's kind of when I started trying to get stuff back together again. So first thing I did was, focus on my health. So I got good habits, cleaned up my diet. Every day I had a plan. It was just trying to move the needle forward a little bit. So lots of workouts. I had to do lots of workouts with my investors. And we were basically just figuring out how can we get as many of these properties sold and offloaded as quickly as possible. I sold 18 houses in a matter of 2 months. I guess that was the first couple months of 23. So we made a lot of progress. Cut the contractor team way down. So, at the peak, we were burning $100,000 a week on contractors. So trying to manage the cash, we just flat running out of money to run the business. So we had to take all the resources, put it to a few houses, get those houses done, use that to get the next batch, get those done. And I also had to keep buying because I'm underwater on some of these houses. So I had to buy new ones to keep profit coming in while simultaneously working through the old ones. It was an absolute nightmare. Yeah, so once we got enough of the projects off the books, my PM, he actually took a job back in corporate, and I actually took over all of the rehabs, and that ended up being quite a blessing in disguise. He was a very, very good manager, so he used to work for the same company that I did. He was used to managing 30, 50 pipe fitters at a time, but what he was not good at was the design side. He literally, that house that I showed you, he would have looked at that and said, oh, that's fine. He literally could not see it, and because he could not see it, he didn't think it was important. It's when I tried to tell him, we need to do this this, and this, he'd kind of roll his eyes and not think it was important. So I took it over myself, and like the aha moment for me was we had this, call it the spaceship house, and you guys probably saw on social media. But it was meant to be an Airbnb, but it was one that I put a lot of design, like a lot of effort into design on it. And we put it on the market, and I made $100,000 on that, which is the most I've ever made. And like this light bulb went off, like when I really, put love into a house and pay attention to the finishes and make it really nice and like allow myself that extra time, people appreciate it. It sells really fast. It sells at a premium, even in a soft market. So that was kind of like the light bulb moment. I went to work improving the quality of our rehabs a lot. I put a lot more effort into design, and rather than doing the cookie cutter, I basically had a design plan for every single house, and things started moving again, like fast. So for example, the last 6 houses, like the market's soft right now, out of the last 6, 5 of them were under contract in the first week. So it made a difference. And then started getting excited about flipping again, because I realized that was actually the part of the business that I liked the most. And when we built this giant flipping business, there was zero room for me to do any of that stuff that I actually enjoyed, because I had to basically stay in my office, stay put, and like just to feed the machine with that number of deals, all I could do was sit in my cubicle, analyze deals, get things funded all day long. I couldn't even go out to a project. We bought and sold houses without me ever seeing them. So yeah, I was not happy. So that's the spaceship house. It went super viral. It was in the New York Post and a bunch of local news stations. But yeah, so these are like some of our new flips, our most recent ones.
$100,000 on?
Yeah. But it's nothing like earth-shattering. It's just making sure, like, upgraded fixtures. It's making sure that all the, paint and everything goes together, and the flooring goes with the paint. It's just putting a little bit more effort into design, and it makes a huge difference. And I actually enjoy that, so it's actually starting to have fun again.
So where is that saucer house at? Is that on
like 435 in Holmes.
Oh wow, that's on the Missouri side.
Redbridge. Yeah. So like this is like my design plan. So I put together like a rendering for every house, and I send that to I do it for the inside too, just so my contractors can kind of get an idea of like what I'm trying to go for, and that helps a lot. So old mindset was systematize, delegate, outsource. It's basically all about efficiency. It's like treating it like McDonald's. Now it's more of like a luxury restaurant. But the big thing is I'm giving my space to do the things that I actually enjoy. So the whole reason that I got into real estate in the first place was lifestyle related. It was to create freedom, and I created this monster that was way worse than my W-2 job ever was. The other thing that has really changed in the market right now is when I first started, it was possible to get that $200 a door, and get 30 units and be financially free.
Yeah.
That is much harder to do in today's environment.
Yeah.
How do you build a business that you like the process and you enjoy running? Because you're not, if somebody is starting out today, you're probably not going to get to that financial freedom number in a hurry. It's going to take some time. So how do you build a business that supports your lifestyle and that you actually enjoy? For me, like I like the flipping, the design part, but everybody's different. So, some people, like my friend Jason Jones, he loves the deal. Like he loves the deal. That's the part of the job that he likes. For other people, it's, it's the rental, it's the numbers. But figure out what it is that you actually enjoy in the business and see how, design your business around that so that that's what you're doing the most of so that you can be happy doing it. And then, the other thing is mission. I had no mission. It was vague, make money. And now I realize I want to make affordable housing that is actually doesn't feel like affordable housing. It's nice, something I can actually be proud of and be proud to show off. So that's what I'm doing now. So reflections, massive overhead equals massive stress. So our overhead, it was almost $70,000 a month at the peak. And that was not including interest payments. That was just overhead. And now it's closer to 10. It's like probably 12 grand, something like that. Burn rate was insane, so trying to manage cash when you're that big was just really tough. The amount of money going out was huge, so like when projects get back up, things just get wonky really quick. And then I got caught up chasing somebody else's dreams. So I'm very fortunate to be friends with some very, very financially successful people. I've got friends with private jets, I've got friends with yachts, I've got friends with exotic cars. And I convinced myself that that's what I wanted, but the truth is I didn't. Like, I just want to do a few houses a month and enjoy life. And there's other things besides just work for me too. Like I like work now, I like music, I got a lot of stuff I like. Ironically though, I'm actually making more money doing a few deals a month because I have very little overhead and I'm making more margins. So like I wanted to build $1 million a year business previously, but I had a partner, so I was splitting it 50-50, and then we had this massive overhead. I can make the same money doing 3 deals a month just by myself. So I can make $1 million a year doing 3 or 4 deals a month, no problem. Anyway, and then the other thing was simplify. I was trying to do too many things. And I think that is a trap that almost every beginning entrepreneur falls into. There's just so many shiny objects. There's many different ways to make money. But if you try to do too many things, you're not going to be the best at any of them. So pick one thing, become the absolute best at that one thing, and you're going to see way more success versus trying to do 3, 4, 5 things at the same time. This is from the book Essentialism, also a very good book. Just kind of shows the energy of trying to do too many things. Highly recommend. The One Thing is another good book that's kind of. So lessons learned. Bigger is not better. It's more work. Okay, sorry. So this is another thing that we changed was we had a GC before. So the GC was almost like a project manager, but he worked for himself. So for him to make money, he had to make money between what we were paying him and what he was paying his guys. So that meant that he's constantly beating his guys down and then nickeling and diming us to try to make a profit in between. This guy didn't have the best character, which is another long story, but it created a very toxic work environment. So the guys, you walk around, they're always pissed off. I was always pissed off because he'd try to tack on a bunch of extra charges at the end of a project. Very frustrating, just like a constant frustration. Now I don't have anybody with more than 8 guys, and every contractor that I have is actually there working on the job. I go to a project site now, it's night and day. They're smiling, they're laughing, they're happy to see me. It's just like, it makes the whole process a lot more fun. The other thing is, weekly progress draws. So that is another that's where we got overpaid on several projects. At the time, because we didn't have any other options, it was very difficult to manage that. But the biggest area where you can get yourself into trouble is if you give a contractor too much money, then he walks off on you. So you have to be really careful to manage that. We do smaller draws on a weekly basis now to try to keep from getting underwater on projects, and that helps. And then ride people on the bus. Like I said, I've had 2 different project managers with very different skill sets. So one of them actually still works for me, but only on a very part-time basis. So I had one who was very good at the design aspect, but he was very soft-spoken. He had a hard time, kind of standing up to, especially the GC. So he was better suited for doing a couple houses at a time. And then I had my other manager who was very good at managing, but zero sense of design. So very opposite skill sets. Anyway, having the right person on the bus makes a big difference. And then the other thing is I would argue is that character is actually more important than skill. For sure. And the reason is because a person with good character, they're going to do the right thing whether somebody's watching or not. It's like my office manager now, I would totally trust her with my bank accounts. My old GC, he was so opportunistic, any chance that he got to nickel and dime me, he would. So character is very, very important. Frog in boiling water, so in hindsight, everything becomes clear, but we waited way too long to make some of those tough decisions. So you got to make those tough decisions early, cutting overhead, getting rid of people, bringing on new people. And then the other thing is, I think as you become a more experienced investor, you start to realize this, but managing the downside is just as important as profit. If you make 20 grand on 2 projects, but then lose 20, you might as well have just done one, right? So you got to be really careful. I'm a lot more cautious now than I used to be, I guess. So the other thing is, obviously, while I was going through this, mentally, it was very difficult. It's a crazy thing. So when you get into the fight or flight mode, a part of your brain actually literally shuts off. So the higher part of your mind shuts off, and you're thinking with your amygdala. It makes it very difficult to do creative problem solving and stuff like that when you're in that mindset. If you find yourself in a stressful situation, figuring out how to change your state and get into that problem solving mode is very important. So I do a whole lot of things here. So I meditate, I go for walks, I've got my whole morning routine, lift weights, I've got a whole support system, mastermind, people like that. Gratitude, I do like sauna, cold plunge, I love doing that kind of stuff. Sketchy things, so I've done hallucinogenics in the jungle. But all sorts of stuff to hack my mindset. And that's, I don't know if any of you guys have read Jason Drees's book. Highly recommend it. He was actually my direct coach for a little while, and then he got too big and famous. So I'm not sure about the order of this slide, but in a flipping business, there's really 4 resources that you're always trying to balance. So one is the money, being able to fund the deals that you're getting. The second one is the deal flow, and then you obviously got contractors, and then there's the ability to manage all of that. I've had different points where all of these have been my limiting resource at different times. So being aware, which one of these is limiting me right now, or which one of these I need to work on, I think keeping that in the back of your mind is very helpful. And it's constantly changing. Right now, my strategy basically is I have the best contractor team I've ever had, and I basically buy enough deals to keep them busy, and that's it. So right now, I put a stop to buying because I'm waiting for them to get caught back up a little bit, and I'm just feeding them the amount of deals they can handle, and that's it. And I'm being disciplined. I'm not buying more than I can take on. It's funny, people kind of fall into one of 2 categories. So they're either like the analysis paralysis, or they're the reckless abandon. And there's definitely a sweet spot in the middle, and I feel like you have to kind of overcorrect a little bit in either direction to get there. And then I wanted to take a little bit of time because I think the devil's really in the details, and some of the most valuable information I've learned over the years was details. How do you actually manage your business? So I kind of wanted to go through our actual process all the way from a lead through closing, and I'm going to talk you through that. So when a lead comes in, this is one of my biggest time savers, is I send that to my VA. My VA has access to be able to run comps, which I'll tell you how that happens. And he basically sends it over to me in a silver platter. I click one link, I pull up the comps, I've got all the information there right in front of me, and I plug 3 numbers. I plug the purchase price, the ARV, and the rehab, and that's it. And everything else basically auto-populates. That allows me to analyze the deal in a matter of minutes rather than, it takes me like 3 minutes instead of 20 minutes. That's a big time saver for me. And the other thing I do is I always do a preliminary analysis. So I will not go walk a property unless I know that there's a good chance the deal is going to work. They still end up not working a lot of times. If I went and looked at every deal that I got, I'd be driving around all day and wasting all my time. So, do a preliminary analysis based on the pictures, do the best you can on your rehab budget based on the pictures, run the comps, make a preliminary offer. Maybe they're listing it for 80 and you think, well, based on what I'm seeing, I need to get it for 70 to make it work. Tell the wholesaler, there's a lot of times where they might actually have some wiggle room. Just tell them what you're seeing. Amenable, go take a look at it, and then you as-built, and then you make your actual hard offer, sign the contract. So once the contract is signed, then it goes to my transaction/office manager. It's my one staff person who wears a lot of hats. But she basically takes it from there. She populates all of my tracking sheets. So it goes on to my investor tracking sheet, my deal sheet. From there, she starts talking to title and doing all that kind of stuff. I send the same sheet, that goes to my investor. So, once I've actually got a deal locked up, that's where I'll send this to my investor. Say, hey, investor, I got this deal under contract. This is the numbers. Let me know if you're interested in funding it. And then we confirm the investor. And then my transaction manager, she drafts all the loan docs. She does all that coordination with the title. She gets the insurance. We bind that before closing. And then another big time saver for me is I do 90% of my closing on Notarize, which is an e-notary. Yeah. I actually did one for my phone for the first time the other day. So it's really slick. I can do a closing in a matter of 5-10 minutes, where especially when you're doing 10 deals a month, that's 20 transactions a month. If you're taking an hour to drive to a title company, and sign and come back, that's a lot of hours out of your week. But what I'm trying to do now is I'm taking all the efficiencies that we had when we were doing a 10 deal a month business, and I'm applying it to a much smaller business so that I can spend more time doing the things that I actually enjoy doing. So anyways, notarize, and then after we close, walk the property with the contractor, get a bid. Then I develop the rehab plan and the rendering and do all that. We walk through that with the contractor. We also sign a contract with our contractors. We used to charge them liquidated damages. I have stopped doing that, which is another story. And then it's basically just managing the renovation process. And another thing is we document everything. Does anybody here use Company Cam? It's a really good app. It does cost money, but for keeping your photos organized, it's actually saved me in a couple different lawsuit situations because I was able to go back and find old pictures and prove that we did or didn't do something. And it's also really good for communicating with your investors. So a really good tool. GPS located. So this is one of my lead sheets looks like. So it's nothing earth-shattering here, but my VA, like I said, he fills out all this information on the top. He does the screen grab. We got the little map here so I can see the locations. So when I'm looking at the comps, I can see where the comps are relative to the subject property. I've got the market overview so I can see what the days on market are and all that. And I've got all my numbers. I can see what my margin is. I can see what my break even is, so I know what is the least that I have to sell it for to break even. All good information, and it just makes things a lot faster. So from that, we do the punch list walk. I document all that in Company Cam. You can actually spit out a report and give it to them. They can check it off as they finish it. I've been a little lazy about this recently, but a lot of times we'll do a pre-inspection with an inspector. We had a lot of issues where we were getting houses under contract, and then they'd do inspections, and something would scare them off, and they'd back out. So a pre-inspection can sometimes be a good idea, and you don't have to check the box as an inspection report been done, because they're not doing a full report. It's more like just a walkthrough. They'll take some photos, identify any big, scary, this electrical box thing's wired wrong, and fix this. And then you can kind of fix any issues that might scare a buyer away before they get under contract. And then schedule photos. They always rerun comps before we list because things change in the time that you buy. From the time you buy to the time of relisting, the price changes. List properly, negotiate. We do the inspections and the resolutions. That is the part that really bogs me down, and that's where I actually bring in somebody to help, which I'll talk about here. And then we do the repairs, repair payoff, close sale, and do it again. So this is what the team looks like now versus what it used to look like. So before it was me and a business partner. We had the same office manager. We had 2 full-time project managers and then full-time VA. And then we had that large GC, he was doing, it's actually more than that, but yeah, 10 plus jobs at a time. And then we had a few smaller contractors to fill in the gap. So now it's just me. I have 1 full-time employee. And then I have what I call a bolt-on PM. His name is Caleb. He's awesome. And it's a very symbiotic relationship. So what we do is I actually partner with him on a deal. It's like maybe I'm doing 3 deals a month. I send one over to him, say, hey, he's really good with design parts. Say, hey, you do this one, and we'll split it 50-50. Then he also is available on an hourly basis. So like I had a week where I had 7 houses closing the same week, and I had all of these resolution items to get done. I just could not handle it. I was like, hey, Caleb, can you handle all this stuff? And he does on there. I pay him like $50 an hour. He handles all that for me. But I don't have that giant overhead drain of a full-time PM. So it's very, very beneficial for both of us. He gets to make 50% off of a flip that I buy, source, and fund. And it's just a really good relationship. And then the other thing, like I talked about, multiple small contractors. Not too many eggs in one basket. You don't have the extra level of overhead. And then another thing that I changed, so when we were doing like the 100 a year, there's just so little time that you can spend on every property that we made them buy everything. So they're responsible 100% of the finishes. Now I'm doing like a hybrid, so they provide the majority of the materials, like the stuff that I feel like makes a big impact on the finished product, which is like lighting and fixtures and all that kind of stuff. Vanity mirrors and all that, I buy it all on Amazon, honestly. So I buy all that stuff and I provide that, and I think that's really improved the quality of our product quite a bit. Amazon is amazing, honestly. Like, you can get way more selection than Home Depot. It's honestly the same price or even cheaper sometimes, and ships right to your door, and it gives you an excuse to show up at a job site too. So you don't have to feel like you're micromanaging because you just say, hey, I got to deliver here. Then you check on the progress. So
what do you consider overhead?
it's like staff, marketing, software. It's mostly staff right now. My VA, insurance, bookkeeping. My old PM was very expensive. I was paying him $150 a year, just straight salary plus all the burn and all that. So that was a big part of the old overhead. And then we had the marketing. And then before we were doing 10 a month was 70,000 a month in overhead. Split 50-50, and now I'm doing 3 to 4, just me, 12,000 a month in overhead, and I own it 100%. So I'm making more money doing less and way happier. And then this is just some of the tactical stuff that I use to run my business. So like I said, company cam for photos. We use e-checks for payments. It's really awesome. You know, you don't have to go meet a contractor with a physical check. It goes right to their email. They can print off, deposit like a normal check. Or ACH. I use Google Sheets for anything that we're sharing between team members. I have probably way too many tracking sheets. We do weekly team meetings. There's a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, so we're roughly following that format. We have our weekly WIG meeting, which is wildly important goal, and every week, we make sure that we're going through every property and we're recording and capturing any action items for every property. We have standard folder structures, so everything's in the same place. So if I want to find the loan documents for 123 Main Street, I go to that folder. That folder is numbered the same as it is on my project sheet. So if it's number 23 that we purchased in this entity, it'll be 23-123 Main Street. There'll be a folder that says 23-123 Main Street, and everything's the same. It's organized. Being organized is a really big thing. And then 80-20 everything. So what is the 20% that moves the needle the most? Try to spend as much of your time there as you can. Try to eliminate all the noise as much as possible, delegate low-value tasks. I try to give things to my VA or my office manager that as much as I can. And then the other thing is just, continuous improvement. Set aside time to work on the business, not in the business, and that's very hard to do sometimes, but just a little process. It's like today, for example. For like months, I've been saying my insurance costs are getting too high. I need to start looking elsewhere and get some new quotes. Today, I finally, got a new contact and got some new quotes. Hey, I can save a lot of money. This is really stupid. I didn't do this previously. So ask yourself, that's actually a very good journal prompt. What am I procrastinating on? Very good journal prompt. And then, masterminds I'm part of several different masterminds, and I found that incredibly beneficial just to be around people doing stuff at a very high level. Parting wisdom, so there will always be challenges. So I'm having fun. The business is going much better now. There are still challenges. Just today, my realtor went into a house. The stove wasn't there anymore. And I was like, there was definitely a stove when we listed this property. It had an alarm in it and it was on an iBox. So somebody that knew the code and knew the alarm code got in there and took the stove. So that was super frustrating. But there's always going to be bad stuff. So you just have to learn to live with the bad stuff, how to make the best of it. Non-attachment, meditation, very helpful. And then most things are not as good or as bad as they make them out to be. So they did this crazy study where it was lottery winners versus paraplegic. And like 8 months later, both of them had more or less returned to baseline happiness levels. So The Gap versus Gain by Dan Sullivan. Highly recommend watching a YouTube video on that. This is all stuff from my performance coach framing. So a good question. What would the wildly successful future me do in this situation? That's a great question. Beware of your ego. I see a lot of people's egos get in the way. It's better to be know the truth and be wrong than always be right. You can read the rest of these. I'm getting long here. That's it. Questions?
So With your investors, are you bringing in just a single investor entity and tying it to a property with a promissory note and a deed of trust?
Yeah, so every investor is tied to a specific property, yeah, for sure.
Can you talk a bit about your lead generation, like why you chosen to stick with wholesalers versus like going direct to owner, like doing your own marketing?
It was purely based out of simplicity. So I found that, I have limited capacity. I could not be a good marketer and also a good flipper. So I had to pick one. I let the wholesaler, their job is just marketing. So they are the best at marketing. I let them do their job. My job is to flip the house.
How are you cultivating those relationships? Like, I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with getting leads all the time, and almost none of them work for what we want to do, or they're not, a good property for a flip. How are you like cultivating those who you're getting real?
It's a lot of things. I mean, it's reputation, it's presence. I'm very active on social media. There is honestly a direct correlation between how I've noticed this, because I had, during that depressed time, I was not posting a whole lot. I just didn't feel like it. I was just, and then I eventually started posting more, and hey, a lot more leads are coming my way. What's going on here? So like, you want to be when somebody has a house to sell, you want to be the first person they think of. Mm-hmm. So like being active, if you're first getting started, coming to events like these, and networking is really important. And then, getting a reputation. Like I've done 500 plus deals. I've never failed to close. I've been late like a day or two a couple times, and I've come close, but I've always figured it out, right? So like there's been deals where, I put them under contract and later figured out that actually this wasn't that great of a deal. I still closed. Wholesalers knowing that you will do what you say you're going to do is a really big deal.
When you talked earlier, you sounded like you were in a pretty dark place, and I'm just curious, what was that moment where when you actually just started making the move out?
I think you're just going to have to like hit a rock bottom, and then, I don't know.
Because you're laughing.
Nowhere from up. Nowhere to go but up. Yeah, I really like the physical part, just getting back in the gym and just the little things. Getting up on time, journal, meditate, eat healthy, try to move the needle a little bit, little by little.
What's your end goal? Are you wanting to flip for active income forever and buy so many rentals, or what's kind of your end goal?
I want to enjoy the process, so I think I'm enjoying the process right now for the first time in years. That is the end goal. Live a good life, enjoy the process. I mean, obviously, I'm going to keep buying rentals. But I'm not the kind of person that could sit on the beach and do nothing. Like, I want to have more freedom to be able to travel and whatnot, but I don't see myself ever not working. It might morph into something different, but I want to build a business that I don't need a vacation from.
Are these slides going to be anywhere to where we can look back at them? Or?
I'm sure I can figure something out, yeah.
After you get your initial preliminary facts, do you go walk every deal?
I do now.
Okay.
So that actually, that's a really good point. So during the peak, I was not able to physically set eyes on it. So the process was one of my project managers would go out, he'd take a bunch of pictures in company cam, and I would rely on him to be my eyes and ears, and then we would go through it together. He'd go through the pictures, we'd come up with a rehab. But where things got missed was it's really hard to get a feel for a house when you don't see it in person. So like you can have two houses that are exact same specs. They're both, 1,000 square foot, 3-bed, 2 baths. But one of them is a really nice open floor plan. It's on a great lot. The other one, maybe it's kind of chopped up. It's like a weird layout. There's, no parking. Like things like that don't always get captured in photos. So that's definitely contributed to a lot of the misses that we have with me not walking in person. So yeah.
Where'd you get your VA at? Did you have to train him, or was that like a long process on?
It was. So one of my friends, he had a VA that worked for a company that went out of business. So I'm hired direct with him. It's not through a company, but there's all sorts of VA companies that you can go through. Yeah.
I'm a hustler, so I just wanted to know your buying criteria now. Since you said you switched it, I know I dealt with you back then, but I took a break.
Yeah. So I don't. It's almost easier to say where I don't buy. So I don't buy in the urban core. ARV wise, I try to stay like between 175 and 350. So I don't do the really low end. I don't do the really high end. I am going a little bit higher now than I used to, just because I'm having more fun with the finishes and whatnot. Try to kind of stay in that middle of the road area, and then I just don't buy in rough areas. And then outside of that, I'm looking at days on market. So that's my other, are things moving in this area? So they kind of fit my number criteria. They're in that ARV range. And things are moving in that area. Chances are I will buy it.
How do you feel about the Ruskin area?
Ruskin's been great. I'm pleasantly surprised how well things are sold there.
You mentioned like design
planning was your favorite aspect, and that's what you enjoy the process. And I'm curious, what like top three, so the other two things you really enjoy in the business, and then how did you discover those were the things you wanted to go back to?
I think for me, like it's the transformation. It's taking a really ugly rundown house to like something that's really nice. I enjoy that process. I like the relationship part. So like now that all of my contractors like me, it's fun like being around them. You know, it's like I even get my hands dirty every once in a while. There was one time where I went over to a house, my contractor put their wrong light on. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So like, you know, change out a fixture. I'll get my hands dirty every once in a while. But you know, working alongside with the guys, building relationships, and all that's fun. And being part of a team, I like that aspect.
So you only have one realtor that works for you, and is that person the one that gives you your data?
No, I mean I come up with all my own list prices and everything. I feel pretty competent in that at this point.
So what do they do for you?
She just lists them.
Collects cash.
Lists them and deals with all the all the communication filters within me.
How's your VA determine ARV?
He doesn't. So I give him criteria. So if it's 1,000 square foot house, for example, I say I want you to run 2 to 3 bed comps and 1 to 2 bath. Or I give him criteria based on the house. I like to have a lot of comps and then narrow down. So what I will do is I will get a fairly wide range of comps, and I'll scroll down. I'll see like, okay, these are starting to be similar, and I'll go from the bottom up, and then I'll kind of figure out what the range is. And I like to look at more. Some people they only look at 3 comps to determine an ARV. I'm not like that. I want to see like 10, 15. It's one of those things where it's kind of like unconscious competence. I couldn't really tell you how I do it, but it's just from doing it so many times that you kind of get a really good feel for it.
What'd you say he uses for that? He's not an agent, or how's he?
So we have realtor assistant access. Yeah.
I get mine to everybody too.
Yeah.
You got mine.
So he runs the comps and hands it to me on a silver platter, but I still put numbers. I get kicked out them last year. Sir.
With what you have going now compared to what you used to have, let's say you've got some really skilled people that, like maybe the people you had before weren't as skilled, which created the problems you had. Would you ever scale to the point you were at before?
Nope.
So what would you have done differently with what you have now, like if you were just starting it?
I think it's just slow and controlled growth. So don't be patient. Yeah, be patient and know that you don't know what you don't know yet. Wisdom takes a while, so you got to take some punches. It's going to take some time. Just be patient. Yeah. Yeah, actually, the really good thing about scaling down was I was able to cherry pick. So like I have the best team I've ever had now, and I got rid of all the bad guys. I just fired my last bad contractor here in the past 2 weeks, and everybody that I have now is like a joy to work with. So it made a huge difference.
No wonder we can't find nobody. You got them all unlocked.
Yes, sir.
Coming from a wholesaler's perspective on working with an investor like yourself, obviously we've done some deals together, but you deal with a lot of different wholesalers throughout Kansas City. What's some of the nitty gritty when it comes to what can wholesalers do better to help an investor like yourself to make quicker decisions? Like you said, you're doing your first analysis without ever going to see the property. What else can we provide up front to help make that easier for you to identify whether it's a go?
The biggest one is just don't try to hide anything. Like I've had wholesalers where like I look at the pictures like, oh, this is a great deal, and then I go walk it and like the back half of the house is falling down. Like they weren't even a picture of it. So like we're gonna find out. Whatever deficiencies, list them very clearly. Take lots of photos and videos, very helpful. And yeah, just be transparent with what you got. There's nothing that makes me madder than looking at a bunch of houses and wasting my time because the wholesaler didn't disclose stuff.
Doesn't mean that you won't take the deal, correct?
The numbers work, I'll take the deal. I mean, it's wasting their time too.
How do you think about personal branding and content production? Is that pretty high on your priority list?
You know, it's becoming higher. Like I said, the more active I am on social media, I've got a lot of good things out of social media, believe it or not. So, you know, that's how I became friends with all the Bigger Pockets people. Brandon found me on there and invited me to be part of that mastermind. I've got investors from social media. I've got deals from social media. Formed some really great relationships with people that I probably never would have met elsewhere. It's been a net positive. It's definitely a double-edged sword, and it's very easy to waste a lot of time on there also. For me, it's definitely been a net positive. All right.
When you look at your relationship, what relationships do you find have been the most important to you during the time of the dark?
just the close friends, the other people have been through it. When you're doing things at that level, not very many people have been through that and understands. Like, I'm part of these high-level mastermind groups. There's not a person in that group that hasn't gone through some kind of fairly significant failure. So it's really, it kind of puts things in perspective, I think, being around those kind of people. And then I guess one thing I didn't touch on a whole lot was the character thing is very important. And I had to learn that lesson multiple times, unfortunately. I actually got into business very early in my career with a guy that turned out to be an actual sociopath and was stealing money and creating fake invoices and all that kind of stuff. So I would say be very, very careful with the people that you get in bed with, because it makes a big difference. You know, my last partner, not a terrible guy. He had good qualities. But, you know, when the rubber hit the road and things started going bad, his reaction was kind of to stick his head in the sand a little bit. I got stuck with the majority of the load there. And be very, very careful in partnerships. They can, sometimes 1 + 1 is 3. Sometimes 1 + 1 is 1.5. So just, you know, be very slow to get into partnerships and relationships with people that are long term. I love like partnering on a deal with a person and kind of feeling about, like, let's see how this deal goes. Like, that's a much better way than a full blown partnership. All right, thank you.